At 63, I thought I was at the finish line, the grand finale. A ballroom full of colleagues clapping, champagne towers, a jazz trio playing my favorite Sinatra tune. My retirement party was everything I imagined, until my son Jacob took the stage with a glass in hand and said, "Tonight, I'm going to tell you the truth about my father." The room stilled. My breath caught. I smiled, unsure, and then he began. "I want to thank you, Dad. You taught me how to chase success. You taught me how to sacrifice. You taught me that clients come first, birthdays can be rescheduled, and love is measured in wire transfers." People chuckled awkwardly. I felt the floor slipping. He continued. "When I was 12 and Mom collapsed in the kitchen, I called 911. I tried calling you 6 times. You were in Singapore, closing a deal. I learned then that some calls go unanswered, not because they weren't important, but because they weren't profitable." Silence. My wife stared at the table. My daughter wiped her eyes. My world cracked in a room full of applause that turned to horror. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't go anywhere. I sat alone in my car, realizing I had everything except the people I loved. What followed wasn't redemption. It was resistance. Silence. Walls I'd built now stood between me and my family, but I wasn't ready to be remembered as the man in that speech. If you've ever chosen ambition over love, or think success means never stopping, stay with me. Because this story isn't about retirement. It's about what happens when the people you love finally stop waiting. My name is Martin Calhoun, and I was born in a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling linoleum floors and radiators that rattled louder than my father's cough. We didn't have much. Not money, not options, not time. But what I lacked in comfort, I made up for in ambition. I promised myself at 10 years old, my kids will never know this kind of hunger. Never. That promise became my religion. I worked 3 jobs through college, stocked shelves at night, tutored calculus in the afternoons, graduated with honors in finance, and landed a spot at a boutique consulting firm in D.C. It wasn't glamorous, cheap suits and overcooked ramen, but it was my ticket out. Then I met Sarah. She was teaching 2nd grade and waiting tables on weekends. We fell into love like it was inevitable. We got married in a courthouse with 10 guests and a cake that collapsed before the vows. We laughed about it for weeks. When Jacob came along, I cried harder than he did, and when Ellie followed 2 years later, colicky and always reaching for something just out of sight, I felt complete in a way no paycheck ever made me feel. Still, I wanted more. For them. I told Sarah, 5 years. Let me push hard for 5 years, and then we can slow down. She believed me. I believed me. Those 5 years were supposed to buy us a future of lazy mornings, family movie nights, and summers in Cape Cod. I started working 70-hour weeks. I said yes to every project, every transfer, every late-night call. I missed dinner, then weekends, then birthdays. I made partner by 40. We moved into a 5-bedroom house with a wraparound porch and a kitchen island the size of our first apartment. I bought Sarah a Volvo. Jacob and Ellie were enrolled in the best private school in the district. I felt like a provider, a protector, a man who'd made good on his word. But slowly, the withdrawals began. It started small. I missed Jacob's 3rd grade soccer final because I was stuck on a red-eye to Seattle. Ellie had a ballet recital, her first, but I was closing a deal in Houston. I FaceTimed, I sent flowers, I made promises. Next time, I'll be there next time. But next time always came with a boardroom attached. Sarah never yelled. She just picked up the slack, packed the lunches, sat through the parent-teacher conferences. She smiled through it all, but it never quite reached her eyes anymore. Jacob started pulling away first. No more bedtime stories. No more asking me to come to school events. He stopped bringing me his report cards. When I asked, he just said, "Mom saw them." Ellie stopped hugging me goodnight. I told myself it was a phase. Kids grow distant. They'd understand when they were older. They'd thank me for the house, the tuition, the vacations. They'd thank me. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Sarah. It was brief, calm, almost too calm. "Jacob got into a fight today," she said. "A fight?" "Yeah, he's fine. It wasn't physical, but some boys have been calling him names, teasing him for not having a dad who shows up." I was stunned. "Why didn't he tell me?" She hesitated. "Because he knew you were in New York, finalizing that merger, and because he didn't want to bother you." I went silent. That was the first time I realized Jacob no longer considered me part of his support system. I was a visitor in my own son's life. I sent him a new gaming console the next day. He never opened it. I still didn't change. I told myself, he'll see it one day. He'll understand the sacrifices. He'll know I did it for him. But deep down, something cracked. Something small, almost imperceptible. I kept climbing the ladder, kept bringing in accolades. But every night, I returned to a house quieter than the one I grew up in. Not because it lacked noise, but because the people inside had learned how to live without me. And I was too proud, or too blind, to see that the very thing I had built, I was slowly losing. By the time I turned 50, I thought I had things under control. My calendar was color-coded. My emails replied to within minutes. My firm was expanding overseas. Efficiency, precision, mastery, words they used to describe me in the office. But back home, the people I loved were becoming strangers, and I was too distracted to notice. Sarah had joined a parent support group at Ellie's school. They called it Resilient Mothers. Once a week, she'd attend the evening meetings, often bringing home flyers about family communication, emotional literacy, and setting boundaries. I never read them. One day, she mentioned, offhandedly, that some of the mothers in the group assumed she was a single parent. "You didn't correct them?" I asked, half laughing. She smiled faintly. "Didn't seem worth it." That smile haunted me longer than I cared to admit. Jacob had once been curious, chatty, eager to explain how airplanes worked or why volcanoes fascinated him. But he stopped talking. He went from top of the class to somewhere in the middle, then to barely noticed. No complaints, no demands, just silence. His teachers called him reserved, respectful, withdrawn. They said it like praise. I took it as proof that he was adapting to independence, like I did growing up. I saw myself in him. That should have terrified me, but it didn't. Not yet. Then came Ellie's fall. I was in Tokyo 3 days into a week-long negotiation marathon. Back-to-back meetings, late dinners with executives, endless revisions to contracts. My phone buzzed during a critical slide deck review. I glanced at the screen. 5 missed calls from Sarah, then 1 from Ellie. I silenced the phone. When I finally returned the call 5 hours later, Sarah answered with a weary voice. "She's fine, just a sprained wrist. But she was scared, and she called you first." Guilt clawed at me. "Why didn't you leave a message?" "She wanted to hear your voice. She cried until she passed out." I flew home 2 days later with a stuffed animal from Narita Airport. Ellie accepted it, then turned to Sarah and said, "Mom, can you hold it for me?" She never called me Dad again. I told myself it was a phase. Kids are dramatic. She'd get over it. But it didn't feel like a phase. It felt permanent. One Sunday afternoon, I arrived home early. I thought it would be a nice surprise. I imagined laughter, hugs, maybe dinner together. Instead, I walked into a quiet house. The living room walls were decorated with school drawings, family photos, collages of birthdays and holidays. I looked closely. In 3 separate photo collages, my face had been neatly cut out. One sketch Ellie had drawn showed her with Sarah and Jacob standing on a hill under a rainbow. The figure on the far right was a vague silhouette, labeled only, "Someone we miss." I found Sarah in the kitchen, packing Tupperware into a tote bag. "Where are you going?" "Potluck at the group." I didn't know we were doing potlucks now. She didn't respond. "Why are the pictures? Why is my face missing?" She stopped, looked at me for the first time all day. "Because they reflect how much of you we actually have, Martin." That night I knocked on Jacob's door. He was on his bed, earbuds in, eyes glazed at some screen. "Can I talk to you for a second?" He paused, pulled out one earbud. I sat down across from him, trying to smile. "You doing okay? School all right?" He shrugged. I searched for something, anything. "Do you remember that field trip we took to the Smithsonian? You loved the space exhibit." He didn't look up. I was 9. "I know. It was a good day." He finally turned to me. "Do you know the last time I had a fever, Dad?" I froze. You don't. It was last winter. 103, Sarah, Mom, sat with me all night. You were in Boston. I called you once. You told me to drink fluids and man up. I threw up in my sheets. I swallowed hard. I didn't know it was that bad. He stood up, walked to his desk, and opened a drawer. Pulled out a folded sheet of paper, wordlessly handed it to me. It was a divorce document, filed, signed, dated. "Your name's not on it," he said. "Mom never sent it in. She wrote it last year. Then she cried for 2 hours and threw it away. But I kept the copy." "Why?" "In case we ever needed it." I left his room in silence, the paper trembling in my hand. In the hallway, Sarah stood waiting. "I never hated you, Martin," she said. "I just ran out of ways to love you." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table until morning, surrounded by photos I was no longer in, memories I hadn't made, and people who'd stopped waiting for me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't losing them. I had already lost them. The ballroom shimmered with soft gold lighting, and the scent of champagne and expensive cologne hung in the air like success. My name was embossed on every menu, printed on every banner. Martin Calhoun, a legacy of excellence. It was a night made to feel like the closing chapter of a legendary career. Speeches flowed, laughter echoed, people clinked glasses and recited stories of my brilliance. I stood at the head of the long table, Sarah beside me in a navy dress she hadn't worn in years. She smiled when people looked but said little. Jacob leaned against a column in the back, sipping soda, his expression unreadable. Ellie was absent, studying, she said. The CEO toasted me. Old partners recounted our biggest wins. A slideshow flashed images of me shaking hands with powerful men, standing before skyscrapers, ribbon cuttings, stock market launches. I watched it all with a swelling pride. I did it. I built something. Then Jacob approached the stage. "I'd like to say a few words," he said, tapping his glass gently. The room hushed. I smiled. Finally, a personal moment. A tribute from my son. He looked calm, almost too calm. "I want to thank my father, Jacob began. He taught me a lot. He taught me how to work hard, how to be efficient, how to prioritize. Polite nods and murmurs of approval floated around the room. But mostly, he taught me what not to do. The room stiffened. He taught me that success can be louder than love, that clients sometimes come before crying children, that birthdays are optional if the deal is big enough, that silence at the dinner table is just the cost of ambition. I froze. Jacob's voice stayed steady, but his hands trembled slightly. When I was 12, my mom collapsed in the kitchen. I thought she was dying. I called 911. I called my dad 6 times. He was in Singapore. I left voicemails. I don't think he ever listened to them. Gasps rippled. I felt Sarah's hand slowly slip away from mine. I learned that night what it means to be alone while someone you love pretends they're doing it all for you. I learned that money fills wallets, but not living rooms. Silence swallowed the room. So tonight, Jacob said, raising his glass, I toast the man who showed me how to chase success and how to make damn sure I never become him. He set the glass down and walked out. No one clapped. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Sarah stood, adjusted her dress, and followed Jacob without a word. The CEO awkwardly stepped forward. Well, that was honest. A laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Then someone cleared their throat. Another person stood and left. Then another. The room deflated like a punctured balloon. I stayed there, alone at the head of a table meant for celebration. The next morning, the video was everywhere. Someone had filmed it, of course. It went viral by lunch. Son exposes father at retirement party. Views soared, comments divided. Half praised Jacob's bravery. The other half wondered why it wasn't kept private. My inbox exploded. Interviews, invitations to respond. I declined them all. 3 days later, my firm quietly rescinded my post-retirement consultancy role. We're going in a different direction, they said. No statement, no goodbye email. The press loved the irony. I stayed inside for a week. Then Jacob dropped the real bomb. A podcast episode titled Why I Spoke, 30 minutes of calm, raw truth. He talked about the night his mother nearly passed out, the birthdays spent staring at empty chairs, the growing rage he buried under top grades, and a fake smile. Then, without drama, he said, I almost ended my life at 17. I'd written a note. I was tired of being invisible. I listened in silence. He ended the podcast with, he didn't know. He never asked. I stopped hoping he would. I wept into my palms, shaking in a way I hadn't since my own father died. The next day, Sarah served me papers. Signed, final, no longer a draft tucked away. I waited, she said quietly, placing the envelope on the kitchen table. But waiting became surviving, and I'm done surviving. I didn't fight it. Couldn't. I just nodded. She walked away. No drama, just the end of something long dead. That night I sat in my empty living room. The photos were gone. The laughter was gone. The man on the magazine covers didn't exist here. Only a broken father remained. And the echo of a toast that ruined everything. But maybe finally told the truth. I spent the first week after Sarah left in silence. The invitations kept coming. Corporate conferences, keynote events, brand partnerships. The offers were lucrative. Your story, they said, could inspire thousands. They wanted me to turn my fall from grace into a stage act. Redemption for hire. I declined every single one. What good is telling your story when you haven't earned the right to be heard? Instead, I walked into a place I had driven past for years without ever noticing, St. Elmo's Home for Children. a low-slung brick building with faded murals and a crooked basketball hoop. "I'd like to volunteer," I said. The receptionist blinked at my blazer and polished shoes. "For what exactly?" "Anything." They started me cleaning storage closets and organizing school supplies. A week later, I was helping with homework, folding laundry, replacing a broken toilet seat. I cut my hair short, sold the Audi, moved into a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like bleach and new beginnings. Every morning, I walked to the shelter with a brown paper bag of lunch I packed myself. It was the first time in decades I didn't have a title, just a name. 2 months in, I met a boy named Raphael. He stared at me for a long time, longer than the others. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. I frowned. "Should I?" "3rd grade. I was Jacob's classmate. You yelled at me once. Parents' Day. I ran down the hall and bumped into you. You said I was disrespectful, told me to grow up." I went cold. He smiled. Not bitter, just sad. "You were like a statue, so perfect, so angry." He stepped forward and hugged me. "I'm glad you're not a statue anymore." I cried in the supply closet that day, and the day after. Meanwhile, I wrote letters, to Sarah, to Ellie, to Jacob, long, careful letters, not begging, not explaining, just telling the truth. 23 letters. No replies. I left one on the doorstep every Friday. Then, one afternoon, a volunteer coordinator handed me a small, worn camcorder. "It was left behind after an event. Looks like someone's been recording you." I pressed play. The first clip was of me cleaning the art room, then folding paper cranes with Raphael, then reading to a group of kids from the Giving Tree, my voice shaking when I got to the part where the tree was nothing but a stump. Clip after clip. Me quietly living, failing, fumbling, helping. Then a close-up shot of my hands holding a letter I'd written. It was addressed to Ellie. "Dear Ellie," I read aloud. "You once asked me what love looks like. I used to think it looked like security, a big house, insurance plans, trust funds. But love looks like presence. Love is being there when someone is afraid. Love is answering the phone even when you're halfway across the world." I paused. I wasn't there, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. I don't ask you to forgive me now. I just ask that you know, I finally see the stump, and I'm sitting on it. The camera didn't move, but someone behind it sniffled. I fast-forwarded. In another clip, I was painting a mural with Raphael. The camera zoomed in on my face. Tired, lined, alive. In the final clip, a shaky voice behind the camera whispered, "Maybe he means it." Then silence. I turned it off, heart pounding. Jacob had been watching me, documenting me, not to expose, but to understand. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew it wasn't nothing. A few days later, Raphael gave me a folded note. "It's not from me," he said, "just told to pass it." Inside were 5 words, written in Jacob's handwriting. "Keep going, I'm still watching." That night, I didn't cry. I just sat still, finally breathing. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something better than silence. It was hope. The message came late on a Tuesday. Just 5 words from Jacob, no greeting, no punctuation. "If you're serious, come tomorrow." Below it was a flyer, a public lecture he was giving at the university. Rebuilding trust, the cost of emotional absence in families. I stared at the screen for minutes, unsure if it was an invitation or a test. Probably both. He added a second message, moments later. "Don't speak, just listen." The next evening, I arrived early and sat in the back row. No suit, no tie. I wore jeans and a navy sweater Ellie once gave me for Christmas years ago. It was tight now. The room filled quickly, students, faculty, a few families. Jacob stood at the front, poised and confident, far from the boy I once knew and rarely saw. His talk wasn't angry. It wasn't about me, not directly. He spoke about emotional availability, the silent traumas children carry, and how absence is a wound that speaks louder than presence ever could. But I heard myself in every sentence. He never looked toward the back, never acknowledged me. And when it ended, I slipped out before the applause faded. That night, I got a text from Ellie, the first in 3 years. "Thanks for not making it about you." No emoji, no follow-up. But I read it 10 times before I let myself sleep. A week later, I received a file from Jacob. No message, just a video. It was a montage, grainy footage of me at the shelter, cooking spaghetti with Raphael, laughing, singing off-key, telling a group of kids they could paint outside the lines. I didn't know someone had been filming that moment. My smile was awkward but real. I looked lighter. At the end of the clip, the screen faded to black and displayed one line. "People can change. I'm still watching." For the first time in years, I felt seen, not judged, not forgiven, but seen. Then came the dinner invite. Sarah sent it. Sunday, 6 p.m., just us. Bring dessert. The house hadn't changed much. The photos were back up, but I was still missing in most of them. That felt fair. Ellie opened the door. She was taller, stronger, her presence quieter but firmer. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. Dinner was chicken and rice, something simple. We sat around the table like strangers at a reunion, nostalgic, unsure, a little fragile. I didn't try to lead the conversation. I listened. Jacob spoke about a new program he was starting. Ellie mentioned her internship. Sarah stayed mostly quiet, observing. When I pulled out the pie I'd baked, burnt edges and all, Ellie laughed, not mockingly, just surprised. "Is this safe to eat?" I signed a waiver, Jacob deadpanned, and for a moment, the air was light. After dinner, Sarah handed me a car seat. "Can you take Grace to the park tomorrow?" she asked. My granddaughter peeked around the corner, holding a stuffed rabbit. I nearly dropped the dish I was drying. "Yes, absolutely, of course." "No spoiling her with candy," Ellie added. "No promises." We all smiled. It was awkward, but it was something. Later, as we cleared the table, Ellie leaned against the counter and asked, "If you could go back, would you still become CEO?" I froze. The plate in my hand slipped slightly before I caught it. I looked at her, really looked at her. "If the price was missing you, missing Jacob?" I paused. "Losing Grace before I ever knew her?" She held my gaze. "No, I wouldn't." She nodded. "Good." And with that, she walked away, quiet, strong, just like Sarah used to be. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The wind was gentle. The laughter inside was faint but real. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was presence. And that, I had learned, was the start of everything. The auditorium wasn't grand. No velvet curtains or golden chandeliers like the ballroom from my retirement party. Just a modest university hall, a black stage, and a red TEDx rug centered under a single spotlight. Jacob stood at the podium, introducing the event he had spent months organizing. The banner behind him read, "How to Repair What You Broke." I was the final speaker. When Jacob first asked me, I said no. "I'm not a voice people should be listening to," I told him. He replied, "Exactly. That's why they'll listen." So I stood backstage, watching him speak with purpose and calm. There was a time I thought strength was power, volume, presence. But watching my son now, I saw that strength was quiet clarity. It was honesty without performance. He welcomed me to the stage with no fanfare. Just a nod. I stepped out slowly. The light was blinding, the silence deafening. I looked at the crowd. Students, parents, professionals. Sarah sat in the third row, Ellie beside her, arms folded. Jacob stood off to the side, arms crossed, unreadable. I took a breath. "My name is Martin Calhoun," I began, "and I am here not because I succeeded, but because I failed." A few heads tilted. "I built a reputation over 30 years in consulting. I was called a visionary, a leader, a rainmaker. I made companies millions. I made my firm famous. I made my family invisible." There were no murmurs, just stillness. I missed my son's first heartbreak. I missed my daughter's ballet recitals. I missed years I can't get back because I believed presence could be postponed. I paused, eyes drifting to Jacob. "There's something I haven't told anyone. Not publicly, not even my family. But if I'm going to talk about repairing damage, I need to be honest about what I broke." I gripped the sides of the lectern. When Jacob was 17, he planned to end his life. Gasps. I didn't find out until years later. Not from him, not from Sarah, but from a podcast. His podcast. He said he'd written a note, that he was tired of being unseen, that I hadn't answered his calls, that he didn't think I ever would. My throat tightened. I kept going. I wasn't there. Not even close. I was boarding a flight to Zurich. I remember because I was annoyed the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I let that sit. I will carry that moment with me for the rest of my life. Not as a badge, not as a lesson, but as a scar. One that reminds me of what happens when we mistake achievement for love. A student in the front row wiped her eye. I closed with a breath that felt like it had taken decades to draw. Repairing what you broke doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with showing up. It starts with shutting up. It starts with listening to the silence you caused. I'm not here to be forgiven. I'm here to show you that even the man who failed worst can still show up. The applause was quiet at first. Then it swelled. Steady, respectful, real. When I stepped off the stage, Jacob didn't say a word. He just hugged me, and that was enough. Months passed. Seasons turned. One Sunday, Sarah called. Her voice was softer now, less edge, more ease. "Jacob and Nora had their baby," she said. "A boy, 7 pounds, healthy." I sat on my porch, gripping the armrest. "Can I began. "They'd like you to meet him," she said. When I arrived at the hospital, the halls felt foreign and holy. Jacob stood near the window, swaying gently with a swaddled bundle in his arms. "This is him," he whispered, holding the baby toward me. I reached out, careful. The baby opened his eyes, blue like mine once were. He stared at me, unblinking, trusting. I held him like something sacred. "We're thinking of naming him Caleb," Jacob said. I nodded, smiling. "It's a beautiful name." Nora suggested a middle name, he added. But I had the final say. I looked up, uncertain. "It's Martin." I froze. Jacob continued, "Not to honor, not to glorify, but because I want my son to know people can change. That broken doesn't mean finished, that redemption is real, and that his name doesn't have to carry shame. It can carry change." I couldn't speak. Later that evening, back at Sarah's house, I sat on the living room floor reading Goodnight Moon to Caleb, while Jacob and Nora unpacked baby things in the kitchen. Sarah sipped tea nearby. Ellie played with Grace in the corner. I finished the last line of the book, closed it gently, and looked at Caleb. His eyes were wide, sparkling. He gurgled something unintelligible and smiled. And then, laughter. A sound so full, so sudden, so light that everyone in the room turned. Grace laughed too, as if echoing him. Ellie chuckled. Jacob peeked in and grinned. Sarah put her mug down, eyes glistening. It was the first time laughter had filled that room since 2008. And in that moment, I knew. Legacy isn't what you build in the boardroom. It's what you repair in the living room.